with us. Nigeria's federal budget is increasingly shaped by fiscal survival rather than economic growth. Over the past decade, rising public debt and soaring debt service costs have pushed the Ministry of Finance to the top of spending priorities, squeezing investment in key growth sectors such as agriculture, power, works, health, and education. This year, though the budget is yet to be approved, debt servicing and repayment at 15.2 trillion naira exceeds the combined allocations to works, defense, education, health, agriculture, police, and power, which together stand at 15.08 trillion naira. To unpack this, I am joined by Dr. Samson Simon, Chief Economist, ARKK Economics Data Limited. Thank you so much for joining me today, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, fantastic. Yes, we can hear you now. Good morning, and thank you for joining me today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, now a quick look at the composition of the appropriation bill gives us a clear picture of the government's, fiscal priorities. Or in simple terms, you can say it shows us how the government plans to spend money. Now, when you look at that, what do you see?
Well, it shows clearly that the government is prioritizing recurrent expenditure. If you look at it, the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, having the lion's share of the budget. Almost half of the budget is assigned to these two ministries. This clearly demonstrates that growth driving ministries like agriculture, infrastructure are not given the priority they deserve. And this, in my view, does not augur well for Nigeria as an emerging economy with aspirations to be one of the largest economies on the global stage and to be a $1 trillion economy in nominal terms. If truly you want to expand to be that big, coming from our current size to what we are aspiring to, then we need to prioritize sectors like agriculture, like technology, like infrastructure. And infrastructure is key for any growth within the economy. And these sectors are not given the priorities they deserve. And they're being squeezed out, they're being crowded out by areas or ministries like finance, budget, and planning. It shows clearly that we are trying to prioritize paying back our debt, so debt servicing and contingency plans. And there's nothing wrong about paying back your debts, because if you don't pay back, you harm your credit rating, and when your credit rating is poor, at the moment the credit rating is not even so good, so it's going to even be worse. So we need to pay back our debts, but if the paying back of debts is squeezing areas that should be given the importance they deserve, then it needs for us to change that so that we can achieve the targets we have set out for ourselves as an economy.
There definitely is a need for us to change that. But the question is, how did we get here, and what are the implications if this continues unabated? I mean, for how long can we sustain this, looking at our debt burden?
Well, we have been accumulating debts, and that's why we have huge debt servicing as a fraction, as a proportion of our spending. If you look at the budget, debt servicing is attracting a large chunk of the budget, and that's because we have accumulated debts over time. And suddenly we keep accumulating debt, so the debt servicing might even be worse down the line. But what we need to do is, nobody is saying that we should stop borrowing money. The importance is that where that borrowing is directed at, are we directing these borrowings to the right areas within the economy, to the right sectors, to infrastructure, to agriculture, to human capital, and so on and so forth? Or are we just collecting borrowing money to even service previous debts? So that's to tell you that we're in trouble, and we need to restructure our debts if we really want to ensure that we prioritize the areas of the economy that deserve all the priority and should be given all the importance that they deserve.
Well, we have the Debt Management Office that regularly tells us that they are doing their best to manage our debt very well and all that, saying that some of those things are spaced, repayments are spaced, and the tenors are probably good enough. But left to you, I mean, looking at what's happening, would you say that these debts are being well managed, sustainably managed, or do we need to do some other things about our debts?
Well, the Debt Management Office might not be wrong in saying they're doing their best. But the reality is that their best is not enough, clearly, right? Since debt servicing is crowding out other aspects of the economy that should take precedence over debt servicing. So that's to tell you that we need to do things differently. And I know it's not within the powers of the Debt Management Office alone to determine the amount of debt. Is basically determined by politicians, the political masters of the Debt Management Office. But I think they should give them the good advice, the right advice that should be followed in order for us not to dig ourselves deeper into this hole. And we need to, our budget is not really realistic, and that's what is compounding this problem. Most of the parameters are not rooted in reality, and that has been the case over the years. And sadly, we have not taken measures to ensure that parameters are rooted in reality, they're realistic enough. Look at last year's budget. We projected expected revenue to be around 40 trillion. Almost towards the end of the year, we're talking about only getting 1/4 of that. And that is not the first time. That wasn't the one-off. That has been the situation for a while. And we don't seem to learn from that. And even trying to roll over the budgets, it is not really helping matters, because you have the same revenue sources and you're struggling to even pay for the current budgets, and you're bringing previous budgets to be funded in a particular year. All these things are compounding the problems, and we need to do something about them if we don't want this situation to even become worse than they are at the moment.
Well, some are saying maybe it's time to sell down JV assets and probably optimize equity within the federal government balance sheet capital structure. What do you make of that?
I think for JVs, we have not been doing so well with JVs, maybe with the exception of the gas, the relationship we have with NNLG. I think the JVs, we have been struggling to maintain that. I don't think we should sell. Maybe if we are going to reduce our participation in that to some extent, because if you sell, what will the subsequent governments in future sell to fund the budget? I don't think selling is the right thing. Then for other priorities, I think everything must be done to ensure an efficient budget. Any leakages that you have in the budget are plugged. Any unnecessary expenditure is not really out into the budget. And if you look at the National Assembly too, to a large extent, it's not helping matters, because you don't normally do budget out of the blue. You do a study, you make sure that it reflects reality as much as possible, and then when you take it to the National Assembly, the padding and then the changes they make, they're not really helping matters. So we need to have a more disciplined budget. I think the key thing we need to do is about being disciplined with our budgeting, and then trying to show up government revenue. And thank God for this current administration with the tax reforms. I think the tax reforms, the new tax laws, will help us to fund the budget, right? But it's not yet the hoodoo. It's still something on the horizon, and we need to see how it plays out, because it's basically the implementation has just started. So we need to shore up our government revenue, because generally I've not been doing well with government revenue, and we need to do something about that. If we can shore up this government revenue, I think that will go a long way in helping the situation.
Beyond the tax reform, which a lot of persons feel will also help augment government revenue, what more do you think government needs to do, and what is it the government isn't doing enough so it can, get the much needed revenue that we're talking about? That's even before we talk about the spending problem.
Well, apart from the tax reforms, I think our overdependence on oil is also an albatross. We need to be less dependent. For our economy generally is highly diversified. Well, it contributes maybe something in the region of 5%. But when you look at our revenue source and our foreign exchange earnings, oil plays this outsized role. And we have been shouting ourselves hoarse over the years to diversify, diversify, diversify. Sadly, we have done next to nothing to ensure that. So we need to diversify revenue sources, not only from oil, but even for the tax revenues, we need to look at other sources outside these two. Foreign exchange earnings too, we need to we need to stimulate more non-oil exports. And also, if you look at the expenditure side, we need to do something about that too. I think we need to prioritize the entire budget. I think we're not getting our priorities right. And when you're not getting your priorities right, and you know resources are limited, and these wants and needs are limited, so then you cannot do everything.
All right.
So you need to start your priorities right.
All right, Dr. Simon, we'll take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with this conversation. Please stay with us, Doctor. All right, Doctor, please confirm that you can hear me, that you're still with us.
I can hear you clearly.
All right, thank you so much. I mean, you talked about some of the reforms that have taken place and how these have sort of helped in generating revenue, and you mentioned the tax reforms which just started. And when we look at subsidy removal, we've seen that a lot of monies have been saved, and some of those monies have also, we've seen it being shared. That's the FARC allocation and all of that. But would you say this has translated to any meaningful change for the everyday Nigerian?
Well, the increases are basically nominal. And I know people tend to demonize the states that revenue has gone up maybe twofold or threefold, and there's nothing to show for it. But the same thing goes to the federal government. Revenue has also gone up. Yet the federal government keeps embarking on borrowing sprees to fund the expenditure. So the truth is, nominally revenues are up, but in real terms, these revenues might not be up, because if you adjust for inflation, you adjust for exchange rate, you may realize that the revenue might not have increased at all in the real sense of it. So while the priorities that the population considers important, and as an economy we should consider important, should be given all the push, should be at the center of whatever expenditure that the authorities push for. That doesn't mean that they have all the resources. Even assuming if the subsidy removal actually increased the revenue to a large extent, even in real terms, the revenue will never be enough. As an economist, I'm being taught that human wants are insatiable, so no matter what, we will never have enough. The richest countries on earth, including America and China too, still have to borrow, and the resources they have are still not enough. The translation now is what really matters. We are claiming that if subsidy should be removed, that will free up resources, and when resources are freed up, those resources will be directed to infrastructure, to human capital, and so on. Sadly, we have not seen much of that, because there's nothing special now that is being done. Now the subsidy has been removed. That was not done when Nigeria was paying for subsidy. Only resources have been freed up, because if we were still paying for subsidy now, we'd have the most twists around our spendings, around our priorities, our budgetary priorities. But now that we don't have subsidy payment, that has helped. But it has not really translated in the real sense of the word, because there's nothing special that is being done now because subsidy has been removed that was not done when we were paying for subsidy.
All right, Dr. Samson Simon, we need to close now. But one last question, and I need you to give me a yes or no answer. I mean, some persons are talking about debt refinancing. Is this the time for that?
Yes, it could be.
All right. Thank you so much for your thoughts on the show today. Dr. Samson Simon, Chief Economist, ARKK Economics and Data Limited.